About 5 minutes ago, this is what was happening to our guest today. In just a moment, live from Israel, we're honored to have a guest today who survived the October 7th attack. Rabbi Litwack, good to see you.
Rabbi David, equally good to see you.
Now, we should tell people that in addition to our guest today, you are going to Israel Motzei Shabbat on Saturday night with a mission, a solidarity mission.
Yeah, there are about a little over 18, I think 18 of us who rabbis from all over South Florida and a few stragglers from other places will be coming with us to bring strength and comfort and solidarity with our brothers and sisters in Israel.
Amazing.
I was at a reunion of childhood friends, and now I'm at a reunion of family.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of those family members is here with us today. Her name is Adele. And this is how I came to know of Adele. This is from the Times of Israel, her blog. She live blogged October 7th and what was happening to her. And I cannot begin to tell you how honored we are to have her here today. Adele, welcome. You are now down in Eilat, yes?
I am. I can't believe you managed to grab that, what was happening now that I put on Facebook. You're really good.
Yeah, that just happened. Do you know what that was, by the way?
Rockets. The Houthis, apparently.
Okay.
Yemen.
So Adele, we thought we would start by, we know the power of stories, and we know how important it is for us to hold these stories close to us. So we want to hear your story. We want to hear a little bit about what happened on October 7th, and then we'll talk about what's happening now and what's happening in the future. So it's yours. Tell us that fateful day.
October 7th actually began for me with October 6th. Nirim is one of the 11 points, the 11 nekudot, that settled in the Negev in 1946, a very historic story, which I won't go into, but I invite people to Google it. I think I also wrote a Times of Israel blog about it. So we're 77 years old, and we had a wonderful celebration. And my daughter is in charge of cultural activities on the kibbutz. So she was in charge of this big bash, the big party. And she and my son-in-law are separated. So she was taking care of the party, and my son-in-law was in his house with my 3 granddaughters who also live on kibbutz. So went to bed, and before I went to bed, my another son of mine was visiting. So he was sleeping in the safe room. That's my guest room in normal times. And I told him before I went to bed, I told him, if you don't see me in the morning when you get up, it's because I'm going out early to a field with wild flowers because I want to catch it with the sunrise. So that was my plan for October 7th. Thank God I was too lazy to wake up and do it, because at 6:30 we started getting rocket alerts. When we get a rocket alert, between the second you hear the Tseva Adom, red alert, incoming rocket warning announcement, until the second you hear the explosion, you've got about between 0 to 10 seconds to get to someplace safe. So as soon as I heard that, I jumped out of bed, ran to the safe room with my son. But it wasn't one rocket, it wasn't two rockets, it was a massive barrage of rockets. So the safe room is has every house within 7 kilometers of the border. Every house in Israel has to have one. But any houses within 7 kilometers of the border that did not have one before 2011, the government of Israel invested billions of dollars to build a safe room on every house within 7 kilometers. We're 2 kilometers from the border. So I ran to my safe room, which has reinforced concrete walls, and that's what you're seeing on. You're seeing my flight to the safe room here. Oh no, you're seeing me walking out of the safe room. Actually, it's reinforced concrete with thick walls. And it has heavy iron sleeve that you have to pull closed, and it's really heavy, so it takes a few good seconds. So if you've got 0 to 10 seconds and you don't have the and you need another few seconds to close that iron sleeve, that's another few seconds that you have to take into account. And it has a door that you have to close, an iron door, and click it shut, so that if a rocket hits the house elsewhere, the implosion won't blow the door open. So I ran to the safe room, and because it was such a heavy barrage, we didn't even dare stand up to close the iron sleeve on the window. We just stayed as low as possible on the ground, waiting for the barrage to finish in case there was shrapnel. And it kept going and going and going. Eventually, at some point, I stood up and closed it. And about 15 minutes later, we got notification that there were terrorists that had infiltrated Israel and that there were terrorists in the kibbutz. We were told to go outside of our safe room, close all windows, lock everything that we can, close the shutters, to go back into the safe room and lock the door, which you cannot do. Because that click that the door does, it clicks so that it locks it, but anybody who's on either side can unclick it and unlock it. And it's that way because these safe rooms are built to keep you safe against rocket attacks. They're not safe against infiltration, which I actually knew, because in 2011, when I got my safe room, I asked the person who was in charge of security. I said, "How do I lock the door?" He said, "You don't. You're not allowed to. It's against the law to have locks on these things, because if something happens to you and you're inside the safe room and you have, say, a medical emergency, the first responders can't get in. So that's why safe rooms don't lock." Not everybody realized this, and I wrote we have an internal WhatsApp group. And on the internal WhatsApp group, I wrote, "But the safe room doesn't lock." And all these people wrote back, "Oh, yes, it does. You just click on the handle." So it was a rude awakening for some of them. I knew it already. And on that internal WhatsApp group, we were witnessing live what was happening via the messages that people were sending. People were sending messages saying they hear shooting. Now we hear when there's a rocket attack, we hear the rocket, we hear the whistle sometimes, and we hear the explosion. We don't hear machine gun fire. We don't hear RPGs being shot and exploding. These are sounds that we've never heard before inside the kibbutz. These were sounds that we were hearing now. We were hearing Arabic being spoken just outside the safe room. So people were saying there are people speaking Arabic outside. There's terrorists coming into our house. They're setting, when the terrorists came into the house and tried to open up. Some of them just came in and started trashing the house and knocking things down, and some terrorists opened up the refrigerator and sat down and had a meal there while the people that were inside the safe room were sitting there petrified, not daring to make any noise with the lights out. My daughter had the lights out. She was hiding under her bed. And at some point, they started trying to open the safe room door. So if you're strong enough and you can hold it strong enough, they can't open it. And when they saw that they can't open it, they set the houses on fire. So I'm seeing cries for help through the text messaging program, saying that our house is on fire, the smoke is coming into the safe room, we can't breathe. And one of the most dire cases was a young family that had an 8-day-old baby with them in the safe room. So, and the terrorists tried to open their safe room door, and they couldn't, but they managed to dislodge it slightly. So there was a gap between the door and the framework. The terrorists had already gone out because the house was on fire. They were trying to smoke them out so that they would leave via the window. And I just saw pop-ups for rocket alert someplace in the country now on the TV, even as we speak. And so these parents were saying, our baby's in here, we can't breathe, send the fire department, send the police, send the army. We had our first responders, a small group of men who are trained and armed. My son-in-law is one of them. He could not go out to join the team because my grandchildren, aged 2, 6, and 8, were at home with him, and he was on his own with them, so we couldn't leave them alone. He was in the house, and we had 4 first responders from our community running around trying to get to where they were most needed, but there were 50 to 60 terrorists rampaging through the community. These guys were so brave. I mean, they first responders are trained and armed in order to hold the fort until the army come for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. The army's right nearby, and nobody could understand where they were, why they weren't coming to rescue us. What we didn't know was that this attack, which had been meticulously planned for over a year, first of all, they went and surprised the army and slaughtered the soldiers that were on the base nearby. So the people that were supposed to be coming to save us were dead. It took 6 hours to get troops into our kibbutz. Other kibbutzim took longer. We had a few lucky breaks. One of them I can't talk about, but something happened which apparently caused the head terrorists, like the leaders, to go back to Gaza. The other thing that was lucky that saved us is that when the first responders tried to get to save this family with the young baby, they got nearby and they were able to kill a few terrorists, but they realized that there were just too many, that they couldn't power all of them. So they retreated to the grain tower. 3 of them sat cover for one who went up top. He saw what was going on from afar, and he was in touch with a helicopter who came over and was able to spray a whole bunch of the terrorists that were just inside the community or just outside the community. I'm not sure which side of the fence they were on. Another thing is that some of the first responders and people who were armed managed to neutralize terrorists inside their house. So my son-in-law, when he heard the terrorists had entered his house, he told my grandchildren, cover yourselves with a blanket, don't make any noise, don't peek outside of the blanket, you're hiding behind there, and whatever happens, whatever you hear, do not run after me. These kids never listen. They listened. He stepped outside of his safe room, and just outside the safe room was a terrorist about to open the door, and he shot him dead. He saw smoke coming out of his pockets, and he wasn't sure what that was. But he jumped over him and tried to get to two more terrorists who he saw running out of the house. But when he got to the threshold, he saw numerous highly armed terrorists just outside his house. He ran back in to protect his children because he realized that he wouldn't be able to neutralize all of them. So he closed the door to the safe room. And then, according to his account, he knelt down on one knee and held the gun at the door. He didn't hold the handle. He aimed his gun at the door and stayed that way for hours until the army came. So at one point, my son was with me, as I said, in the safe room, and he understands a little bit of Arabic. And we heard voices speaking Arabic. And he said, he's sitting there by the safe room door on the floor, holding the handle down. That's our new battle cry, hold the handle down. And he said, they're saying, come here. So we didn't know if they were referring to us or to somebody else. We certainly had no intention of listening to them and coming there. We waited for a while, and it sort of quieted down. We didn't hear them anymore. And after about an hour, I was in physical pain. We had not gone to the bathroom because the alarm woke me up, and I ran straight to the safe room. And I endangered my son's life and my own by doing this, but I quietly opened the safe room door to see if I could tell if anybody was there, and there wasn't. But what I saw in front of me on the other side of the house, on the other side of the room, was the slats to our window had been busted. So apparently what had happened, they were trying to infiltrate my house. They didn't try very hard because it would have been really easy if they had really wanted to. And somebody called them away for something else. So whether it was divine intervention or dumb luck or my late husband watching over the two of us, they moved on.
Adele?
We didn't have any information. The people who were like in charge of security, in charge of the emergency team, kept sending us messages saying the army is on the way, but they didn't have any real information to give us. And they didn't have any real words of solace to give us because none of us knew anything, including the first responders, including the emergency team. The first soldiers that arrived came at 1:30, 7 hours later. So these guys, these four guys who were supposed to be holding down the fort for 15 minutes max, did whatever they could for 7 hours.
Wow.
When they arrived at 1:30, they started going through the community, neutralizing terrorists as they found them. They went first of all to that family with the baby, and managed to extricate them from their burning house. And then they went house by house, being sure that there were no terrorists around, and at one point started evacuating people in small groups to go to the community center, which by that time was surrounded by army, and protecting us. And we stayed there until evening. It took until about 9:30 for all of the families to be extricated from their houses all around kibbutz. We're about 450 people in our community. And at that time, they didn't know if they'd gotten all of the terrorists, but they'd managed to clear out areas enough to be able to take part of the people who were in the community center which by this time was crowded, and there wasn't even enough room for everybody to just sit on the floor, let alone lie down. So they took some of the people to different children's houses, daycare centers on the community that are also rocket proof, because all this time we were still getting incoming rockets. So they evacuated them under fire to the children's houses, where people remained. Some of us remained in the community center, and some of us remained in the children's houses. Again, with very little information, but we were told that at some point the next morning, when they're sure that they have cleared out the kibbutz as much as possible, we would be sent to our homes to quickly pack bags and be evacuated to Eilat. That didn't happen until 1:30 in the afternoon the next day. And all this time we were petrified. I mean, it was less scary being in the community center with other people, but it was still scary. It was like it, when I was with my son in the safe room, I literally thought I wasn't going to see another sunrise. And I've never seen my son looking so scared. The look at his eyes was just heartbreaking. And we told each other that we loved each other, and we said a form of goodbye. We didn't say those words, but we told each other that we loved each other.
Adele, I don't even want to interrupt because it's such a powerful full story. I'm giving you a chance to have a drink of water, but I realized as we were preparing for today that we we've heard so many of these horrible stories of what happened in the first 24 hours. I mean, in the first 5 hours, in the first 7 hours. Um, and now that whole area is evacuated. Right? And one of the things that I'm going to be doing in the coming week is going and visiting people who have been evacuated. And I want to know what are you doing? What's the conversation? How are you keeping yourself busy? I see you as internal refugees. And I can imagine living in South Florida. We have hurricanes and we have to move. We got to take our stuff, but we have days to get that prepared. You had an hour or so to grab whatever you could, and so now what? What's going on now?
So I'm very lucky. I I do this as much as I can in any place I can. I've not turned down one interview. I spoke to school kids this afternoon in Albania. Anybody who reaches out to me and says, "Can you talk?" I talk. I'm I'm well occupied. I do social media. I'm working on a TikTok that I'm going to be shooting out after this. Um, and I help my daughter and son-in-law with their children. But there are many people here who can't find themselves. They're just sitting around the hotel all day. There are some activities that happen, and people who have the wherewithal to get up and go out. We're in a lot. It's a tourist center. There's places to go and things to do, and usually it's safe. We don't usually have these rocket attacks. Um, but I just realized yesterday when I went to an activity to build resilience, and I was there with two other women from my community who are a little bit older than me. They were saying that they just spend the whole day in the hotel sitting around talking to other people, the oi 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 and what are we going to do, and just sort of wallowing in their sorrow, which they certainly are entitled to because we've all lost a lot. But they have nothing to take their minds off of things, and even if they do, they don't have They don't have the cheshek. They don't have the will to get themselves out and do things. A sort of a depression, it sounds like. I mean, one of the women said that she just sits around and sometimes cries, and it's very sad. It's very difficult for many people. The children were building a minimal framework for children, not really school, but we're trying to get that up and running because we're going to be here in this hotel for at least 2 months, and we're going to be out of our homes 6 months, a year. Nobody knows to tell us. Nobody can say. I'm an optimist. I think it'll be less time. I think it'll take less time to have our areas secure enough to maybe have the IDF continue working in Gaza, but for us to be able to go back. But the question is, what has to happen for us to be able to get our resilience back, for us to be able to get our security back, for me to be able to be back on Nirim, not only to live in Nirim again and feel secure, but for me to be able to live in Nirim again and to have the feeling that, yes, I can get up at 6 in the morning by myself, get in my car, and go out to take pictures of that field nearby. That's going to take a lot to get that resilience back. And resilience is the name of the game. I mean, I have it tattooed on my arm, and that's the secret. That's what we need.
All right. I have to admit that I saw the tattoo. I couldn't see what it said, but thank you for sharing that. And I think you're right. I can only imagine what it will take to deal with the trauma, to work through that, and then be able uh, to figure out what's next. And that's sort of the last third of this conversation is, what's the conversation like for people who are living in um, the Gaza envelope or Western Negev, depending on you know who's naming it. Do you hear people saying, "I'm not going back"? Do you hear people saying, I am going back and I will rebuild bigger and better"? Um, what's the feeling? How are people imagining the future, or are they at this point?
So we can't really imagine the future yet. I can only speak for myself. I take each day as it comes. And even this, like for today, at the beginning, all I had on my plate was one interview, this now, and the school kids in the afternoon. And all of a sudden, this one pops up and that one pops up and wants me to talk. And I don't have plans for for more than tomorrow. I want to get through today, and tomorrow will take when it comes. And I've heard people talking, but nobody can really be decisive about it. I've heard everything that you said, I've heard said. I'm not going to be able to go back and live there. On the one hand, to we're going back and we're building it up and it's going to be bigger and better than ever, and everything in between. But nobody really knows when we're going to be able to do that, what's going to have to happen for us to be able to do that, and who's going to be able to do that. I mean, I cannot see my daughter coming back to live on Nirim. She was post traumatic before this, and her kids now are completely wacko. There's a saying in Hebrew, it's called scratched, like an LP record, when you have a scratch in it. Those kids are scratched, and those scratches take years to heal, if ever.
Adele, we've been hosting about 30 plus Israeli kids here at Temple Sinai, and giving them some framework and some school and some fun and whatever. Families who have left Israel, and they're not from Kibbutz, they're not from the front line, as it were. These are families that I think by and large have chosen to leave just out of wanting to be safe. And even those children we're seeing are scratched. Even the Am Yisrael as a whole is now scratched, I think.
We're more than scratch now. Our
Yeah.
DNA has changed.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think you are.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I was always the first person to say, this is not a conflict that can be solved with weapons and bombs and rockets. It can't. It has to be solved with diplomacy. And I've always said that I'm sure that the vast majority of Gazans just want the same thing that I do, to put food on their table and safety for their children. But since October 7th, that's I don't know that I can say that anymore. I know that there are good Gazans. I'm in touch with good Gazans that want to make peace, that want to raise their children differently. But an entire generation has been raised on hate. Those movies that I'm sure you've all seen of kids in the kindergarten who get to their end of year play, and their end of year play is children dressing up as fighters from Gaza, and the IDF and the fighters from Gaza kidnap them and kill them and take them hostage. Those are the monsters that were in my community a month ago. Those are the monsters that did those unspeakable acts of beheading and cutting off children's hands while they're still alive, and cutting babies out of their mother's wombs, the most horrific, unimaginable acts. Those are the monsters that were raised to do this. So I've come to the conclusion that before we can make peace, we're going to have to make war. And only then, only after the Hamas have been totally destroyed and neutralized, and their weapons abilities have been neutralized, only then, with the ones that are left, with the ones that really want to make peace, will we have who to talk to. And Israelis know how to make peace. We're really good at it. We'll make peace with anybody who wants to make peace with us. We made peace with Jordan, peace with the Egypts. We have the Abraham Accords, that although you hear whispers, they're still there. We'll make peace with anyone who wants to make peace with us. That's not the people on the other side. And in addition to those highly armed terrorists who came over to our communities, you had ruthless citizens of all ages. I saw closed circuit TV of Gazans coming through our fence, with the hole in our fence, men with crutches and young teenagers just flooding into our community by the tens, setting cars afire, just going in and destroying houses, doing horrific acts of terror with shovels, decapitating people with shovels. These weren't the armed terrorists. These were the Gazans, the Muhammad on the street. So where were the good Gazans on October 7th? Where were they? I was in touch, as I said, I'm in touch with people from Gaza. Most of the people that I know well and I can call friends aren't there anymore. But there is one person that I was in touch with, and she wrote me at one point on October 7th, asking me how I am. And I sincerely asked her how she was and expressed empathy and hope that for her safety. But at one point in that morning, she said, "Where are you?" And I said, I'm in my safe room. And she wrote, I'm right outside. I said, "Where are you?" She said, "I'm just outside." And I'm like freaking out. I'm thinking, what's going on here? I know she meant that she's just on the other side of the fence because that's where she lives. But I started questioning her as well. If not her herself, maybe somebody who had taken her phone and knew that they were in touch with an Israeli on the other side. I stopped communicating with her until I got to Eilat. You don't know who to trust anymore. And there were
That
so many fails, so
yeah.
many fails that day. The impenetrable underground barrier, the fence that they slid through like kids on a slide at a water park, the safe room that didn't keep me safe, the army that didn't keep me safe. So many fails, one after another, after another, after another. This is why what happened in Niroz was able to happen because of all those fails. So who do you trust?
So there's how is there anyone to trust on the other side of the fence? And there's also who can we trust within our own borders to keep us safe? There are so many questions, and the only thing that I want to add to this is, Adele, I'm so grateful that you're okay, and I'm so grateful that you are sharing your story. Just everyone needs to hear this. Everyone needs to hear this. And you're a blessing. You are a blessing to us. I'm so grateful that you took the time to talk with us today. And
Thank
just
you.
want to,
Unfortunately, 240 of us are not as safe. And my friend Judy, whose name I'm going to put on the other side of this when I get a chance, who's a Canadian American Israeli. She's 70 years old. She was an English teacher for children with special needs, mostly a mindfulness teacher, a puppeteer, a funny lady, a peaceful lady.
We're
and
waiting for
and
her to come back.
what she's going her one of her daughters reached out to me today to ask where she got her glasses made. So I told them the optician who did her glasses, and I said, have you heard anything? She said, no, but we're preparing stuff in case the Red Cross, who have not been there yet,
yeah.
the Red Cross have not been over to
From,
find them, to see them.
from where I sit in my comfortable perch, the only thing that anybody should be talking about right now is bring the hostages home. That's it. From again, from where I sit. We do have to go, but I'm just
Adele, can I ask?
sorry.
I'm not going to ask. It's not a big question, but you have been such a gift to us, and to get this story out. We want to do a gift in appreciation. So, my congregation is our congregation has raised a lot of money, and I'm bringing it to Israel. Tell me where you all right, want us to put a donation to help. What's next?
So our community needs money, but there are communities that need it even more, like Niroz. Um, and there are communities that have just sort of fallen between the cracks. I don't know how much help Netivot, people from Netivot are getting. I don't know. This is something that indeed needs to be researched. And I'm afraid I'm not the person that can really help with that. But it
Then
needs to be researched where the people are, where the people's needs are not being met by the government, because there are those.
yes, there are, and thank goodness, good old Yiddish cup and Israeli resilience and a populace that is scrappy and willing and ready to jump in where needed, is filling that gap in some ways. I will bring dollars, and I will be thinking of you, and so appreciative of your sharing your story today. Thank you. And
So I just want to say before we go, thank you for raising my voice, and just the fact that there are people like you on the other side of the ocean, on the other side of the screen, gives us strength, even without the wonderful gifts that you're going to bring. just your presence, just your caring, just your being there for us gives us strength. And it's so
On our bima is a chair, and it's draped with a flag, with an Israeli flag, and that flag will remain there until our hostages are home.
I can only speak for our community, but in our community alone, there are hundreds of people that are sending you every blessing and every good wish for Hatzlacha and Bracha. We all are, as to the extent that we can, we are with you
thank you.
and we love you.
Thank you.
So grateful to you, Rabbi Litwack. Nesiat Tova, safe travels. When you come back, I'm sure we'll get a report from you as
You
well.
going to come down to Eilat to visit me?
I don't think so. I'll be lucky if they let me go to Ashton.
He's on an organized trip, so he doesn't have a lot of say.
So it's very tight.
But you know what? The week after he gets back, I think I'm coming. I can come down to see you in Eilat.
There you go.
Lots of love. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very
Shabbat
much.
shalom. Shabbat shalom.